Now that we have introductions out of the way, I just have two words for you guys. Chrome OS.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now, before I start getting comments telling me about how Chrome OS is the worst thing that you've ever used, and like kicked your dog or something, hear me out. Chrome OS is like Linux. In fact, it technically is Linux. It's a Linux distribution. From what I could find, Chrome OS, which started life as Chromium OS back in 2009, is a fork of Gen 2 Linux, one of the kings of Linux distributions. In fact, Chromium OS itself has been forked into other distributions, which means it must be good for things other than locking you into the Google ecosystem. And to that end, I would actually agree. Chrome OS is good, but it's not for everyone. It's good for that older family member who just wants to browse the internet easily, or the child who needs to look up stuff for school and write papers and just generally needs internet access to do things. A Chromebook can be what some people are looking for, but using it comes at the cost of paying, on the low end, $200 to $300 for a laptop that feels like it came out of the claw machine. Thankfully, Google has started rolling out Chrome OS Flex, which can be installed on any computer and turn it into a Chromebook, which will allow people to get more use out of their older hardware since Linux distributions generally run with lower spec requirements and run faster, even on older devices. But I digress. We're not here today to talk about Chrome OS, or even Chromebooks. I only ever had one myself during school, and I didn't keep it. See, the first Chromebooks released in 2010 as unbranded prototype machines, and then a year later with the first commercial machines being produced by Acer and Samsung, two companies who are still very deep in the Chromebook market. But it wouldn't be until 2012 that Google would add another member to the Chromebook family, known as the Chromebox. The Chromebox is a small form factor PC that runs Chrome OS, kind of like the small form factor HP ProDesk line that you may have seen on other channels like Hardware Haven. The main difference being that Chromeboxes never shipped with hard disk drives. Google stated from the start that they would only use solid-state storage in Chromebox and Chromebook devices in order to improve their already superior speed. But then that raises the question, how are these devices so cheap, despite the fact that they were running solid-state storage all the way back in 2012 when solid-state storage was still pretty expensive? Well, that comes down to three things. Storage size, RAM, and CPU. Up until about 2014, Chromeboxes would only come with 2 or 4 gigs of RAM and usually a 16 gigabyte SSD, whether that was a true solid-state drive or an M.2. The cheaper models would generally run an Intel Celeron processor, with later models having i3s, i5s, and i7s. Believe it or not, Chromeboxes are still in production today. A lot of them come with more generous hardware in them, like minimum 4 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs of eMMC storage, with options ranging up to 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. But the Chromebox I'm talking about today is the Asus CN60, which came with 2 gigabytes of RAM and 16 gigabytes of M.2 SSD storage. This guy came out in August of 2014, with official support for it having ended in September of 2019, nearly 5 years ago. But enough about history and specs. Let's actually take a look at this device. So this here is the Asus Chromebox CN60. It says here, oh damn it. There we are. It takes a 19 volt barrel jack here on the back. It's got Ethernet, 2 USB 3.0 on the back, HDMI DisplayPort, and 3.5 millimeter audio jack. It also has 2 USB 3.0 on the back, a power button, and SD card, so you can put a full-size SD card in here, or one of those adapters for your micro SD. This right here is the reset pin. This is important for the jailbreaking process of the Chromebox. But before you do that, you do need to open this guy up because it has a read protect screw on the inside that you do have to remove. So the screws are beneath these feet right here. I don't believe there were screws here. If there were, I have lost them. The goal is get these feet off, remove the screws, and after that it comes off pretty easily. So let me go ahead and get those off because only this one really comes off easy anymore. I mean, they all come off pretty easy once you remove them a couple times, but after the last time I recorded this, I found out that I cannot do this one-handed, so give me a second. Alright, after pre-loosening them, can see that there are 4 Phillips head screws in each of those posts. So we're going to go ahead and get those removed. And these are all the same size, I'm pretty sure, so it does not matter which one goes where. But I am stripping the hell out of that screw. Alright, so this thing just pries open. Generally, I go in through this little lip here where the power button is. You do want to be careful though. The last time I opened this, I did pop the power button out. It did click back in, but you know, you always want to be careful about messing those sorts of things up. So let me see. I'm gonna go ahead and pop this off. These things are amazing for getting plastic clips to unclip. Usually these are for removing the adhesive between the bodies and screens of phones, but really nice. Made this come off really easy and I didn't have to actually pry where I normally do. But here is the inside. Normally there's only one of these slots populated. I believe it's this back one right here with the 2 gigs of RAM. But we can see we've got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth module, the 16 gigabytes of SSD storage in there, and I have put 16 gigs of RAM in here, DDR3. Not the fastest, but I think this board only supports up to a certain speed. I could be wrong about that though. Normally, the way I would have wanted to do this is I would have installed the Linux distribution on this built-in SSD right here. However, for the flavor of Linux that we're going to be installing, it actually prefers it that you install it on a flash drive of some sort. Now, I don't remember where the Wright Protect screw is. It's either going to be this one or this one right here. As you can see, I've put it back just so I don't lose the screw, but you only have to remove it for the process that you can find on mrchromebox.tech. And then after that, you can put it back since you're probably not going to be writing to it again. Editing Bytewise here. I just wanted to point out that I was completely wrong. Do not put the right screw back in. Now that we've seen the hardware, let's get to actually installing some Linux on this guy. The Linux distribution that I'll be installing on the Chromebox is called Batocera Linux, a distribution that is essentially RetroPie on steroids. The reason I say that is due to the fact that, for those of you familiar with RetroPie, Batocera has a very similar layout, using Emulation Station for the menu and RetroArch as a default emulator for consoles up to about the 5th generation. But this is about where the similarities end between the two. RetroPie is built with the Raspberry Pi line of single-board computers in mind, while Batocera has ports for multiple single-board computers, PCs, and handheld emulators, even an official release for the Steam Deck. RetroPie only comes with support for up to the 6th generation of consoles, with some exceptions like the Wii and Nintendo DS. Batocera comes with support for the full 7th generation, as well as a portion of the 8th generation like the Wii U, Nintendo 3DS, and the ability to add support for the Nintendo Switch through some commands on the terminal. Batocera comes with several services built in and ready to configure like Samba and SyncThing, which allow for users to remotely manage their ROMs or have changes on one device sync with other devices also running the service. While this could be something you could achieve on RetroPie, the fact that Batocera has easy options to enable both of these services makes it easy for a new user to the system and Linux overall to get a lot of high-level usage out of their device out of the box rather than having to experiment with terminals and seemingly arcane Linux settings. But as with RetroPie, the use of Linux gives the Chromebox enhanced performance versus something like Windows. One thing I'd like to note about using Batocera is, in my own experiences, I found that the transfer speed of the flash drive does play a role in the load times and performance of games. For my personal Chromebox, I went with a PNY 128GB USB 3.2 flash drive, which I will link below. Despite the fact that the Chromebox only has USB 3.0 ports, when I ran Batocera on a USB 3.0 flash drive, I was experiencing significant slowdown versus when I used my USB 3.2 flash drive. Now, you could get significant improvement by replacing the M.2 SSD on the inside with more storage and installing Batocera onto that, but you lose the ability to easily add ROMs to the device by simply plugging your flash drive back into your PC. Batocera does have the option to run an SMB share or Samba, so if you're a Windows user, you can easily connect to your machine over Wi-Fi and transfer ROMs at the cost of your bandwidth. Linux and Mac users can also take advantage of this share, or they can opt for an SFTP transfer. This comes at the same cost to bandwidth as the Samba share does. My personal setup utilizes the built-in SyncThings service on Batocera and having it synced to my main home server, letting me add ROMs to all of my machines that run Batocera and back up my saves so I can transfer my progress between devices. I highly recommend this setup if you want to set up more than one of these, or if you want the ability to seamlessly switch between your Chromebox and maybe your main PC, or a Chromebox and a laptop that you travel with. In fact, the latter setup emulates the portability that gave the Nintendo Switch its appeal when it was introduced to the public, but in this case, the hardware does not stay consistent, which could be a downside to some, as you wouldn't be able to play all of your game library between both devices. Speaking of which, we're going to take a look at emulation on the Chromebox. Hey, Editing Byteways here again. So you know that comment that I made about Bringus Studio's videos? Some of his videos where he'll use his phone to record the screen? Because I already dropped $150 on an EVGA XR1 to capture content and not have to do the Bringus Studio thing of recording the screen. Yeah, so I'm going to sound like a bit of a hypocrite, but my EVGA XR1 Lite decided that it did not want to record the output of the Chromebox in the crystal clear 1080p that I was expecting it to, and instead mangled it like this. So, because I wanted to show you guys the output of the Chromebox itself and not just a simulation, we're going to be dealing with some of that screen capture via camera pointed at the screen. So John, I do apologize. No shade to you. I was just making a little funny joke. Now back to the actual video. Batocera has a lot of settings that you can tune for every console, or even per game. Its defaults are optimized for performance on the device, with the default emulator for most consoles up to the 5th generation being RetroArch. However, generations after that opt to use the emulator. So for example, PS3 will use RPCS3. In my testing, I found that everything up to the 5th generation ran flawlessly on the Chromebox with no slowdown. NES, SNES, the Game Boy family, Nintendo 64, and PlayStation all ran perfectly, with some slight audio weirdness with a few PlayStation titles like Silent Hill, but these audio quirks were negligible. The 6th generation is where things start to fall off. Dreamcast runs pretty well, with only a few games in my library giving me issues, one in particular being Jet Set Radio. GameCube has an even steeper drop-off, with only a few games that ran decently, like Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion, and The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition. One thing that I wanted to point out and show off to you guys is that even though this runs like RetroPie, you can set up modifications in the configurations of these emulators. This is something that I did with Animal Crossing on the GameCube to give it HD textures and make everything look nice, as you can see here. PlayStation 2 did just as bad, with my only working game being Dark Cloud. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and Liberty City both ran at sub 10 frames per second. I did not test the original Xbox due to the performance of the rest of the consoles in the 6th generation. My thought is that it would probably run about as good as the PlayStation 2 did. Turning to handhelds, the only handheld I tested was the Nintendo DS, which ran okay. Certain light games like the Ace Attorney series run flawlessly, but other games that only utilize 2D sprites like Cooking Mama ran horribly, and games that utilize 3D graphics on the device ran even worse. From what I know about PSP emulation, I wouldn't be surprised if PSP runs better than the DS does. However, I do not own any PSP games in my library. So now to answer the question, should you get a Chromebox in 2024? Personally, I'd say yes. Most of the games that I'd want to experience or replay fall within what the Asus Chromebox CN60 can play, and it does it flawlessly. Nintendo 64 is one of the consoles that I feel like a lot of emulation handhelds and devices used to fall short on, and because of that, I have not had a chance to replay some of those titles in a while. I've been seeing this Chromebox on eBay for about $40, and you can get 16 gigabytes of SODIMM DDR3 for about $25. Batocera supports most Bluetooth controllers, including modern Xbox and PlayStation controllers. So if you already own a game console, you don't need an extra controller for this guy. So, for the price of a new game, you can experience decades of amazing video games that you may have missed out on or haven't played in a while. Or, if you're looking for a light client that allows you to do most basic tasks, and maybe even some light gaming, you could do that too. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me show off this device as a workstation. But for those of you who want a light gaming box to sit next to the TV or to bring with on vacations, this would be my pick. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, this is going to be my sort of end card thing for right now. I'm going to try to keep this as unedited as possible. I want to thank you guys, especially for my first outing introducing the channel. You guys absolutely killed it. I didn't expect that many people to see that, especially since I only intended it to be the video you see when you click on my channel, but I really do appreciate everyone who commented, and I can't thank you guys enough. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if you want to see me do more like this, or maybe if you want me to change gears to a different topic, but I've got about 6 or so ideas for future videos. And after this is done, I'm going to start working on the next one. I've already started writing ideas down on what I want to talk about. But again, thank you guys so much, and have a good night.